Yes, Shugyla already told us.
No, I only think this way. We should only do it like this.
They say, why did I get into this?
Such army-like conditions.
She won't tell us the secret today.
Compliance, our good old favorite, as always. You know,
Oh man, there's no money. Oh, I'm out of strength.
got some hype, took off, made money, then, I don't know, spent the money?
I tested my startup on my grandmother's.
It's not in that ease of testing hypotheses.
Then in that case, when to fight? And when to let go?
And here everyone answers this question for themselves.
To be honest, there's a lot of extra noise around fintech startups. Lots of talk about innovation, about new models, about how someone is going to rebuild the financial market now. But if you look not at the words but at the result, you see a rather unpleasant thing. Most of these projects simply don't work in the end. And the question isn't even that someone has a bad team or a weak product. Often the problem is deeper. People enter the market feeling they have a strong idea, and then it turns out the idea doesn't really guarantee anything. At some point, the main thing comes out. The product isn't that necessary, the economics don't add up, there's no trust, acquisition is too expensive, and regulation is harder than it seemed. And the founder themselves sits in rose-colored glasses, ignoring the harsh reality and believing in the project until the end. In short, fintech is a field where it's very quickly tested whether a project can work in real life, or if it only works well on paper. I think it's important to talk about this separately. Not about successful success, not about unicorns, but specifically about why is it that 90% of fintech startups don't work in the end? Today we'll talk about exactly that with Shugyla Sagynbekova, a person who has seen this environment not in theory, but live through working with teams, consulting, community, content, and real cases. Hello.
Hello. Thank you very much for inviting me.
This is the xChief Central Asia podcast. Anyway, let's start with a certain illusion, with a certain romanticization of the startup world that we hear about firsthand every day. And today, startup is almost a buzzword. Why almost? Because the biggest boom, you could say, was in 2023, especially in Kazakhstan, when we saw at every turn startup, webinar. It was mainstream, you could say. Today, however, this sense of mainstreamness has dipped a little, and now there's a noticeably finer line between starting and surviving among startups. So, this romanticization, this excessive startup culture that has entered into our modern society, it's honestly so striking. And why do you think startups seem simpler than they actually are at their core?
Well, I believe it's because people in general, when they look at a phenomenon, they assume that everything is very easy and they only see the result. They don't see the whole journey that led to that result. All those decisions made, the mistakes that happened to achieve that result. In addition, we can draw an analogy here with trendy professions. Well, say 20 years ago, everyone was applying to be lawyers or economists, but few knew how or who becomes a successful lawyer or economist. But parents said you had to apply so as not to work a hard job, so to speak, right? And enter that profession. I think something similar is happening in Kazakhstan with startup culture and the definition of startups. And regarding the decline, I'd say it's perhaps in the Central Asian community, like on LinkedIn or social media, where the decline has started. But in the regions, it's only just reaching them.
So, it's like a branching out.
Yes.
It's like a spider web that gives an impulse from the center and it spreads out. Well, interesting. And if it's not a secret, in your opinion, which is the most, let's say, impulsive region at the moment, besides the capital and Almaty? Well, if we take this, let's say, perception of a spider web, again, it gives an impulse there. We have Terricon Valley, we have a hub in Atirau and in Shymkent, especially since they recently held Digital Bridge, right? I mean, I think you went there.
Yes, I went. I hosted the final of the startup idea competition, the startup idea contest for Red Bull. It's actually a global event that Red Bull holds, if I'm not mistaken, once every 2 years. And this year they held it in Kazakhstan. And there's a very curious point here. They collected about 3,300 applications from all regions. It's very curious, by the way. Unfortunately, I don't know the breakdown by region. Maybe that would also be very telling, to find out who's interested in submitting such ideas. And in the end, a project from Uralsk won.
Interesting.
Yes, and a good health tech project, by the way. The finalist who won will go to Silicon Valley to defend his project and present it at the world final with all the participants.
Is that like a grant or sponsorship?
Yes, exactly. Red Bull fully covers the trip. And Red Bull,
Not the state.
no, it's a private initiative from Red Bull. But of course, if I start talking about Terricon Valley now, since it's my hometown, Karaganda, but I just know I was in Karaganda when all this was starting and taking shape, and they have a very active community. I'm constantly being invited to give lectures, workshops, or seminars to speak and share. And among the cities I've visited, at the moment, it's the one where it really resonates, and more people come to these activities. I would, by the way, highlight Karaganda and Uralsk because I remember when I traveled with workshops for Red Bull Basement for that competition, I first traveled with workshops and then hosted the final. It was in Uralsk that there was such a concentrated entrepreneurial audience, and moreover, solid entrepreneurs came, those who have a business but who have somehow faced the digitalization of their business. And I believe that most of those entrepreneurs in Uralsk can actually probably become successful startuppers in this case because they already have a business and they already understand how to do it.
Uh-huh. I can't help but add. It's that very feeling when Red Bull really gives you wings straight to Silicon Valley. Good.
Yes,
There's also this point you've been interacting with startups, right? For more than a year. And I think our listeners and viewers from different countries will be very interested to hear your opinion on where and at what point in your experience does this kind of shift in expectations occur? That is when a startup says, we'll do everything, we'll crush it, we'll work 24/7, we'll do it all. But, oh man, there's no money, oh, no strength. And this turning point, it happens at some point, it still appears.
as someone who has been working part time for 2.5 years, so to speak, as a tracker, an expert in incubation and acceleration programs, both in Terricon Valley and in Astana Hub, it all depends on the people. I've consulted over 100 startups. I've individually managed 7 projects, 6 of which went straight to sales, validated their ideas, yes, made a good MVP, and earned a total of about $6,000. But there's a curious point, by the way. One startup earned the largest amount, about $5,000, while all the others earned small change.
Mm,
So that's also the kind of situation it is.
we understand.
Yes, we all understand perfectly. Look, it depends on the people, it depends on the founder. There are those who give up after the first diagnostic session, and they realize that making a startup isn't just fun and games. It's not like watching the Silicon Valley TV show, it's real work. And, there's a parallel here probably with working on a personal brand, because I'm also a PR specialist. I've consulted a number of people on personal branding, and they have the same romanticized idea that a personal brand is just filming reels and posting them on the internet. When they face the fact that it's a lot of work, a full time job alongside their business or work, they're like, my God, what is this? So the same thing happens with a startup. And of those startups I've consulted, again, your statistics match here. 90% of them, I don't even know where they are now. And the rest, about 10%, continue to work, earn money, and still occasionally pop up in the media space.
What surprises me is you say, like this, like that. The most interesting thing is that, especially people who are just now digitalizing, so to speak, they say, well, what about your Instagrams? What about your threads? All these various devices of your space, aliens. And then you actually show them that filming and finishing it all, making a cover, figuring out how it'll work, plus boosting it and making sure it brings in some leads. They say, why did I get into this? I don't want to go there. You're inviting me, but I don't want to. So what I'm getting at with all this is, in startups, there's this whole thing with burnout, with the positive milestones. And the milestone of sadness, so to speak, when the startup starts realizing everything's bad. Well, not like absolutely terrible, but it's there. So, in your opinion, Shugyla, is it possible to prepare in advance? Specifically, let's say for the startup, let's say not Spartan, but the startup period of life, that romantic one, where we imagine, say, some Dasha who's dreamed of it her whole life, then she jumps right in and gets disappointed. Can we teach Dasha beforehand or prepare her?
That's a very common practice. By the way, you can even, look it up using AI or just Google it the good old fashioned way, that the most successful startup founders, well, those who either sell their product or make a successful profit from it are usually people age 35 plus
Yes.
who already have a career, a network, social capital, even if it's not material,
Or LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. And they might even have their own material capital. And that's really the case. So these stories, like the Mark Zuckerberg type or Snapchat, I don't remember the founder's name there. Even our Hickswell, it's that kind of story, like survivorship bias, basically.
Millionaires. Let's just call them millionaires.
Hustlers, yeah.
I haven't seen a single case, statistically speaking, of a huge number of successful people who weren't over 30 or 40. I only know of one startup in Kazakhstan that offers to create a bot in a couple of minutes. Well, there are many such startups now, but that was one of the first. And yeah, he was a schoolboy. So that's one example I know. But then again, there's the question of where the capital came from. I mean, but on the other hand, he managed to do it while still in school. And he went to Silicon Valley.
Well, it's also like in the States. Oh, like in marketing, there's this law when you're first to market, you skim the cream, and then maybe over time.
Make coffee,
Yes?
but for now, just tea,
I only drink black coffee, so.
but without sugar. Okay, good. Let's talk a bit about founders. Since you interact with them often, and I don't just mean Timur Turlov, whom you adore, as we know firsthand from your social media.
I was just telling them a joke. That's different.
Nevertheless, you met him in person. Well then, so here is my question. Why do founders under 30 have much less of a chance, in your view, to build a successful startup?
Maybe first of all, because we don't have that kind of data yet, data points. Perhaps considering artificial intelligence and the fact that, say, those same Gen Zers who had access to mobile smartphones much earlier, maybe we will see that change. Why isn't it the case right now? I think there aren't many studies yet that would focus specifically on this. At the moment, well, I think it's first a matter of research, and second, well, I also assume they're just busy for now, and it's also about how they're trying. The founders I've worked with, successful founders, well, not quite 35 by the way, but definitely already 30 years old. At the time we started working with him, he was 29 to be precise. 29, if I'm not mistaken, yes. When we started working with him, he was the founder of the GoCrowd startup. By the way, yeah, he wasn't even 30 yet, basically. He founded a startup for fundraising for companies. And by the way, when he was already 30, there was a point where about 460 million tenge companies were able to raise on his platform. I worked in that startup myself for about a year, so there is an example like that after all. Well, yeah, it's kind of an outlier. There were several years of work on that platform, including working with the AIFC to ensure that scammers couldn't register there, to verify investors and those raising funds. In short, a huge amount of work was done. So I believe they will exist, but I think for now they just don't. Because there's no research, first of all, and second, well, let them learn and work. They have other things to worry about.
All right. There's a lot of fintech in your story. A lot, well, let's say predominantly so. Why fintech specifically, Shugyla? You know, you have to wake up in the morning, drink your coffee that you took with cream, and say, it's time, I'm going into fintech. I mean, the decision must have come somehow.
I ended up there quite by accident. Actually, it was after my time at Astana Hub. I was working at the Technopark, well, in the marketing department. Well, unfortunately, I had health issues, so I left. The pace there is very intense. It's still the same. I think it's become even more intense since then. And I just wrote a post on LinkedIn saying, listen, I'm looking for a job. I know English. I have this experience, preferably remote, right? But I can travel to Astana occasionally and so on. Like, I don't know, here are my skills. I can talk anyone's ear off. Well, roughly speaking, that was the post. Literally that same evening or the next morning, I got a message from the founder of the GoCrowd startup, Alpamize, and a day or two later, we signed a contract and I started working. So it was actually quite accidental. But I think the reason he responded, well, yeah, responded to that post of mine, an open call for a job search, was because he saw my connections on LinkedIn. But I was already using LinkedIn in English, and this was back in 2021, which for Kazakhstan was, well,
Wow.
wow, yeah,
Back in 2021.
in 2021. And yeah, I had built up a certain amount of social capital, and I think that also played a big role. So I got in quite by chance, but I was interested. I worked at a startup for a year. We had restrictions because we couldn't really go public on social media since the platform was still in development. But I worked on the community there, so a lot of work was done. And I'm very grateful for that experience because I was really inspired by the fact that Alchemies wants to make investing not just accessible, but so that established entrepreneurs, not even just in IT, but small and medium sized businesses, would have the chance to raise investment not just through bank loans, but also through this kind of constructive approach, I believe. Because I believe that investing on platforms like these is a very constructive thing. Kazakhs actually have this tradition where if something bad happened in a village, the whole community would come together to help and support that household. And I think this really resonates with that tradition. And there's a very positive foundation to it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. In general, a fintech product isn't just a product. As we know, it involves money, time, security, and again, various regulations and compliance. It's a field that tends to absorb and take on many of the problems and challenges that arise at that particular moment in time, while also working to solve and address others that come up. And honestly, the idea of just making a minimum viable product or MVP and then simply testing it out sounds, to be honest, like a bit of a joke anyway, if you really think about it. Because everyone wants to do it that way, but not everyone can. So that leads directly to a relevant question. What makes fintech one of the toughest niches for launching a startup compared to non-fintech?
Compliance. Our good old favorite, compliance. And that's quite right because if we take a closer look into history, like for example, how bank deposits developed in the Russian Empire, there were in fact some truly huge losses. And if we don't look back that far, even in the 2000s in Kazakhstan, people basically lacked financial literacy, especially regarding loans. Everyone had access to credit, and that turned out very badly, leading to high levels of household debt. So, right now, and like all these measures in fintech are being taken because it really optimizes access to money, access to resources, but at the same time, you can't forget about security. And so, yeah, this whole thing of let's launch, let's build an MVP, I don't know, make it lovable, do something like that. Listen, it's interesting, of course, but if you've chosen such a niche, then I think you immediately need to keep a few things in mind
And money.
and money. Money. And social capital as well, because money is one thing, but you also need people to trust you.
And did you have a moment, Shugla, where you saw from personal experience a founder who at some point realized what he'd gotten into?
This is without names, okay?
Well, we can do without names, of course.
Yes, there was. And also, it was an already established founder who understood what he was getting into, well, more or less, but he later got out of that situation. Well, everything's fine, they're working, making money. For me, it's probably a bit boring like that. I mean, I'm mostly acquainted with or have worked with founders who continue to work and make money to this day. But, well, this turning point, it was long and difficult. An acceleration program speeded it up. By the way, it's a good point, yeah, for startups too, including fintech, to get immediate access to a network, to resources, to connections. But specifically, this participation in the acceleration program helped him a lot because he realized he had to work like 2 or 3 times harder. And he also understood that, well, like, while there's this limited time of the acceleration program, you need to manage to do as much as possible during that time so that because later you lose these resources. After all, you lose this network of other founders around you. So, yeah, it was curious to watch that, and especially curious to see when people, especially those who are already established, they have a career, a home, a family, but they have to internally break and reshape themselves to go and pitch to investors. Find the first ones, run pilots, yeah, in the first companies, so it takes time.
Shugla, you've mentioned acceleration programs several times during your story today. Yeah, and a question occurred to me, and I don't remember the number, which ones roughly, if you could name them.
Oh, yes. I consulted for such acceleration programs myself, the ones that took place at Astana Hub, in Terricon Valley, and also mostly on incubation programs. I still worked more with the little ones. It's very logical because, relatively speaking, I have a small event business, but I haven't earned hundreds of millions on it yet. And in terms of my job position, I'm not C-level yet either, right? So accordingly, what could I possibly teach? I don't know, a serious startup that's earning at least several tens of millions. Well, yeah, even then, what could I teach them? Because I still have to reach that level myself. That's why I mostly consulted at places like Startup Garage at those.
Accelerators?
I think so. I don't quite remember, but basically for the little ones,
What about Draper University?
no, 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 not there. But when I worked at Astana Hub, I was the one who created the promotional campaigns so that people would apply for those programs.
See?
Yes.
Maybe you could share a few secrets. Because you've really intrigued our listeners now. They're like, what are the secrets?
When the first participants went, and they were warned though. But they were all in shock because the conditions there were like the army.
She's not going to tell us any secrets today.
It's like army conditions. I mean, they wake you up at 5 a.m., you jump into a pool,
That's Draper.
yes, at Draper. You go out on the street and sell condoms to people. So, yeah, they work the founders very hard there.
Those are some powerful secrets. Now I understand why you didn't want to tell us. All right? Let's talk about a product that nobody needs. All these startups, all these companies, they create, they prepare, they produce. The product is released and then it's gone. But they really wanted to create it. They worked towards it, but the product doesn't exist. So this problem of a product that nobody needs, it's the simplest and most subtly painful trauma for every startup. Or for a startup that failed to take off. So people make these decisions themselves, supposedly, right? Again, we're all independent, we're all adults. But then they try to force the market to fit the product instead of the product fitting the market or the audience. It's just the opposite. So, Shugyla, how do you figure out this secret that the problem actually exists?
Listen, I'll tell you a little story. This was one of my very first incubation programs where I was tracking a startup individually. And my mentee was a woman. She was a Kazakh speaker, a very cool, active woman. She had many children, and she was on maternity leave herself. She was very concerned about the financial literacy of other mothers, too. And she created something specifically for them, like an online expense tracker. And she literally built it using no code. By the way, her solution was one of the most convenient ones I've ever used because she had been a designer before and she did a really great job creating such a great, simple solution for the user experience. I'm saying this as someone who's tried almost every expense tracker in the App Store. And her mistake was thinking that this product was needed. Well, her mistake was that she chose a target audience of mothers who also need this product, but they don't realize yet that they need this product. And they weren't ready to pay for it. And we solved this problem in such a way that I suggested she distribute this, like a no-code MVP, not among the target audience she wanted to reach, but there, I don't know, I just remember it well. I said, well, I don't know, your eldest daughter is at university. Try selling this access through her at a discount. And in the end, literally 5 of her daughter's classmates bought it and became the first customers of her solution.
Niche.
Niche, yeah. So that can happen too, that, very often they try to force the market onto the product. It can also be that the founder just can't reach their target audience, that the product is actually needed, but it's, niche, and it might only be needed by a specific audience. And people find it very hard to let go of their illusions.
That's the point.
It's specifically about them having a hard time letting go of illusions when they don't want to understand that their product isn't needed. Or when they realize their product isn't needed by the target audience they're trying to push it on, so to speak.
So in this case, can the product still be saved in time? Or is it already the final point of no return?
It really depends on the founder. I think it was easier for me because she was also a woman and we both found, a way to connect with each other. But out of all the other 100+ founders I've consulted, and those I haven't heard from again, apparently they stopped working on the product. Of course, I might be biased, and it's also because, as a rule, founders, there are just more men. But for me, for example, as a female consultant, it was harder to dissuade men. And you see, the consultant's job isn't really to dissuade, but to lead the person to reach that conclusion themselves. Sometimes they just don't want to get there, and you just leave it as it is.
Painful.
Yeah, it's painful, but
That's life.
that's life. And here, sometimes they just don't want to listen and maybe they're just not at the right stage to understand it. I can't claim to be 100%, how should I say, truthful, that if I said this product doesn't work, then it doesn't work. That's also silly.
Well, I've heard that too, but most often you hear words like, "But you're also part of the team. You're also part of the company. Why were you silent?"
It probably splits there, yeah, when it happens when you're actually part of the team and you're working. I was lucky here. I either worked where I wasn't exactly listened to, or I just stopped caring about the company and left soon after.
Wait, when I interacted with some companies, it sometimes reached such an absurdity. Well, in some cases, it's absurd. In other cases, depending on the company and the product, it's not absurd. They listen to the most junior employees right down to the very lowest level of the hierarchy.
I've often encountered the fact that, well, maybe the perspective is different here. I've often encountered the fact that one way or another, well, employees or even myself, I understood the problem, but I just didn't talk about it, right? And here we're talking about big companies. I didn't talk about it because I didn't see the point. Like, well, I'm not paid enough for this.
By the way,
Firstly. Secondly, often I've had it happen twice where almost word for word, this problem was voiced by either some consultant hired from abroad, right, or someone who was specifically brought in. And they parted ways with that person very badly because they didn't want to let go of their illusions once again. And looking at that, I was like, well, I guess it's time for me to pack my bags too.
did you ever have a moment where they invite this consultant and the consultant says, "Here's your problem"? And they say, "Yes, Shugyla already told us"?
Not yet, but honestly, I think that's coming soon.
All right, Shugyla, is the team the main asset? Or are we talking about the main risk that you might encounter in any startup or company? Well, honestly, I am absolutely certain that you deal with all of these kinds of challenges and issues every single day without exception. What is it?
Yes, it's both an asset and a risk.
Asset and risk.
Yes.
And how can it be? Polar opposites?
It can be quite polar because, say, when you're consulting a team or joining a new team, already as an employee, you're like, these are really great guys, honestly, and they work exceptionally well together as a team. Yeah, they consistently build a truly great, high quality product, and they also know how to sell it very well, too. And the moment you get a chance to actually see the inner workings, you realize they're everywhere, involved in so many different aspects. But there are always these unspoken issues, these moments that go unmentioned. And you can really see how, over time, it can become a significant risk if not addressed. For me, especially as a PR specialist, because PR is partly about communication and the company's public image. And in many ways, it can also overlap with compliance as well. And when I'm consulting a team that's already working and making money, for example, or if I'm working in a company, then yes, you evaluate, okay, what could happen? Even a bit like a paranoid person, but just hypothetically, and say, even if it's a team that sells well and so on, but they're working to exhaustion, they haven't had a vacation in years, there's a big risk that everyone will burn out and everything will stop without people. If it's a team where, say, I had a situation where marketers generated leads and salespeople handled them well, by the way, I didn't have those classic wars with sales, but then something happens at the tech sales stage when technical sales get involved or PMs do something wrong, basically. So that kind of thing happens, and they don't do it because they're like people bad or unprofessional, but because they're swamped with projects. So it's both an asset and a risk.
Speaking again about teamwork, right? On one hand, it's mega important. On the other hand, in your example, what you just mentioned, it's not always important. If the idea is important, or the people, or compliance, again, the funds, so there are always certain priorities. But let's say if I were to ask you, what are the top 5 mistakes that teams in startups make specifically as a team, not as a startup, but specifically the teams? What is the real answer here?
Probably the first one is when they don't delineate responsibility, when there's no clear hierarchy in the team. That's important.
Fraternization.
Yes, we humans are social creatures. In that sense, we're even a bit like dogs. And so you need to set a clear hierarchy and hold people accountable, right? Even when we're assigning tasks, so we can understand and monitor how those tasks are being done or not. And when we all get together, tee hee, haha, getting together to eat pizza, that's not a startup. Working, building a product while also keeping in mind that it's scalable, right? It'll be for the whole world. Now that's a startup. So the first thing, yes, is that you need to establish a very clear hierarchy. Who is responsible for what? Of course, everyone will be backing each other up. If someone has something come up, yeah, well, I don't know, for example, in my team at the moment, I can back up the commercial director, jump on a call. I'm not exactly required to do that, but if he's busy, then why not? So first and foremost, it's a clear hierarchy. Maybe there won't be a top 5, by the way. Maybe it'll be a top 3.
Well, a top 3 is also good.
Second is monitoring. Trust, but verify. And here too, for a person who, well, in this case, as a founder, if you're doing this with friends, yeah, let's say, well, you're likely doing it either with friends or with some acquaintances. Then it's important to set it up so they don't get offended, so there aren't those kinds of issues. So he can check, she can check, and hold people accountable for tasks. It's, well, because if a task isn't done, it's not closed, then what kind of startup are we? What kind of productivity are we talking about?
An unsuccessful one.
An unsuccessful startup, yes. And third, I would say probably don't rely on investors. Don't rely on investors, strive. And here, of course, there's another distinction, right? If we're talking about health tech, that's a long game. And here you most likely need investors first and foremost. I mean, they don't make money that fast, they need to validate the solution. But if we're talking about fintech or e commerce or really any of the other industries or sectors, then honestly, you shouldn't really rely on investors. Oh, there'll be a fourth one. This is a real life case. If you're pitching at various competitions, it's very important. This is a practical point I've observed. It's crucial to get a valuation from investors. I mean, don't rely on them, but go to them and use them as social proof, right? And I know some people do that. They go and pitch, send out their pitch decks, and that way they get a financial, so to speak, for free valuation. Yeah, they get a valuation for their startup that way. Well, any method is good if it's as cheap as possible, free and easy. Why not? I just saw this one case myself, a big Kazakhstani company when they were at a pitch at Digital Bridge a few years ago, and they were asked, these are industry stars, Mikhail Lomtadze and Tim Draper, by the way. They asked the person, what is your valuation based on? And the presenter was like, oh, well, there's this company in America, basically, they value themselves like that. So we decided to value ourselves the same way. You shouldn't answer like that. I mean, even if you lie, it's important to show you've done your homework because both of those, let's say, patriarchs came down on him with such criticism. And it's very important to have social proof here because next, I remember when a girl came out to pitch, that was Aman, actually, Arujan Medye, when they asked her that question, just so you understand, the context of that previous pitch was still there. And she's like, well, we got a valuation from this venture fund. That was it. Everyone relaxed. They let it go, meaning she had done her homework, right? So that's what's important. You earn social proof, you take that social proof for yourself, and that's it, basically. There won't be a fifth one for.
I was there in 2023 as well. I saw Draper too. And I remember there was an investor session later. They always have a separate pavilion at Digital Bridge. I don't know how it happened. Anyway, there's this Georgian venture fund sitting there. So I go up to them and ask, what do you have here? We're a venture fund. I say, okay. And what do they do here? Well, they're defending their investments here, doing that stuff. I say, great, super cool. I say, and what's going on? And right at that moment, this old Georgian guy walks up. You can tell he's the head director of this venture fund. He says, what is your metric based on? The guy says, on grandmas. Then he goes, what grandmas are you talking about exactly? After a brief pause, he says, look, Aunt Marina, listen to me for a second.
Name dropping.
Yeah, where did you get it? He says, I tested my startup on my grandmother's, on all my female relatives, and it works. And it was medtech.
Well, I mean,
Yeah. Well, overall, not bad. And in the end, he even shared his contacts. I don't know how the story continued after that or not in Georgia, but nevertheless, he got the contact.
that's impressive.
Yes, it was very impressive. And we haven't discussed sales. We haven't discussed sales. It's an important milestone. Every day we hear about sales. And from here, I can't help but ask another question. I'll divide it into two parts. With your permission, Shugyla, The first part of the question, look, we're comparing 2022 and 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And right here, we are actually comparing it directly to the year 2026.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the first quarters, well, let's also take the end of 2025. How great is the need, in your opinion, in terms of percentage, or maybe you'll just say less or more, for startups to get investment? As far as I remember, well, this is my personal observation. In 2023, almost every other startup was looking and hoping for investment. But since you're more into the startup scene, I think you have a more objective view of the problem, the essence, and the numbers. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. My perspective might be a bit skewed right now because I work for a company that doesn't really classify itself as a startup and doesn't need investment. This is already the second such company I've worked for. I'm just lucky in that regard, to be honest. Well, at the moment, I don't really see those kinds of companies anymore, based on those I've consulted. Every other one, as a rule, well, it's actually every single one in all these programs hoping for investment. But then again, we're talking about the little ones, the incubatees in incubation programs.
6+.
Yes, exactly. But if we're talking about more stable startups that are making money but would still like investment, look, they do get that investment from time to time. And in Kazakhstan, maybe it's not as widespread anymore, again, like in Astana, and they've just filtered out, those who were just starting with their brilliant ideas. But now, thanks to Higgsfield, which became a unicorn last year,
Faith has grown.
faith has grown, yes. And even my Seven Ventures, just a couple of months ago, they invested in a company called Dodox, for example, a Kazakhstani one. And before that, they also invested in one of our Karaganda tech entrepreneurs, by the way. So, against this whole general backdrop, I see that faith has grown, and not just in Kazakhstan, but across Central Asia. I mean, even in Uzbekistan, for instance, the number of deals has increased.
And there was some news recently
Yes,
that they want to build an expo. Oh, AIFC, I'm sorry, correction. They want to build their own AIFC, an AIFC analog in Tashkent.
in Tashkent.
Yes, a huge business center with 3 skyscrapers, something like that. Something massive, something cool. And I also heard they want to build another sphere in Almaty, like the Expo one.
And
It's also possible as an IFC.
I've only ever heard that it's kind of like Alato City,
Well, there's a lot more to it. They haven't told us much yet. Well,
Yeah, maybe I haven't heard about the sphere.
quick question. How quickly should you enter the market?
Ideally, right away, I see entering the market as when you, as a founder, don't just ask yourself in the mirror or your mom, but actually go out and ask complete strangers. That's already entering the market, and it should be seen as at least an attempt at lead generation, so to speak, because even if that person, okay, isn't paying you money yet, they're paying with their attention, right? Giving you their time, and that's also very important. You need to start selling, or at least trying to sell your idea immediately, and don't worry about someone stealing it. An idea is worth nothing on its own, to be honest. Execution is what matters, the fact that you made it happen.
Then a very objective question comes to mind. In your opinion, what is the role of PR and content in the survival of a startup or a company? Quite an unusual, non-urgent but thoughtful question from me.
Well,
Let's philosophize.
yes. As I've noticed, PR as such, if you only have an idea right now, in fact, when you're doing customer research, right, from the very beginning, basically you're testing the idea, seeing if anyone cares, how much it's needed, if people are willing to pay, and how much they'd pay. That's already a form of PR in itself. And PR is necessary, but again, it's not about filming reels, renting a studio, making reels, and just posting about how super successful we are. Here, PR is about making sure your audience knows what you're doing so that your friends and your friends' friends know what you're working on. And it's a game for the long-term perspective. On one hand, that's why it works so well when people who've worked in a certain field start doing something similar or take over a niche within that field. In my case, of course, it's probably silly to give an example like that with stand-up. Though, man, my life is all about stand-ups and startups. But why did it take off so easily with English stand-up? Because I used to work for a non-profit organization at the American corner. People always associated me with the English language, even though I only taught it to a very small number of people and a long time ago. To this day, I still get occasional offers to teach English, and I even thought recently, while talking with friends, that maybe I should develop some kind of method and just do it. Yeah? But
Start a startup.
start a startup? Well, no, it's not a startup. It'll just be a fairly traditional business. So, regarding PR and content, again, it also depends on the founder. If they're private and don't want the spotlight, well, let them stay out of it. But if they find an executive diva for their team, so to speak, who really wants to share, let it be organic. But forcing yourself to sit there like a hedgehog, terrified of the camera, isn't necessary. People sense that. They pick up on that insecurity. They won't watch that person's content. But someone who enjoys what they do and loves sharing it, people will watch that. And what's more, even if they mess up, well, at least they tried. So I'd say that PR is actually even that ongoing process of customer research and development that you're constantly doing as part of your business. And for people to really give you their attention, because let's face it, attention is incredibly expensive now. It's like capital, it's a form of currency in today's world. You absolutely need to have a strong, recognizable brand. And that also ties back to PR, your personal reputation, and the content you put out.
Well, in that reputation and content, there's a very fine line between really real value and hype.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we recognize it? That line, so we don't lean too far one way or the other, but instead we actually stay balanced right in the middle in our lives.
I'd say that on one hand, hype is subjective because everyone is so different.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my eyes are trained now, so I spot hype immediately. I know when they're trying to trigger me to comment or to share. And obviously, not everyone is like that. How to avoid the hype? Well, look, maybe you actually need the hype. Who knows? It all depends on your business goals. That's it. It's always so funny. When people come for consulting, I first ask about their business goals, metrics, and sales KPIs. Then they're like, but we're here for a PR consultation. And I'm like, well, I want to know if you're going to pay me or not.
Yeah, the money, George.
Right, so if it aligns with your goals, if it is a good fit for your needs, and doesn't alienate your audience, then why not? Like with our Heisel, for example. But if we're talking about investment platforms where you need to build a long term brand, then you should definitely think twice about hype. How to draw the line? Well, it's a simple answer, but everyone has to decide for themselves. But generally, I think most people, at least I hope so, are sensible enough not to post, blatantly inappropriate things. Or posting something that's unacceptable, something that's prohibited by social media regulators. So if you don't post something like that, don't do something like that, then it's not hype.
Okay, it's not hype. But can you then boost this weak product with strong marketing, strong everything? Well, let's say we see that it's not hype.
Uh-huh.
Well, not hype.
Uh,
It a weak product, and the market isn't right.
mm-hmm.
Well, can you boost it? Can you make that magic happen?
Well, you can boost it.
Or is it like when you walk into a bank, maybe you want a loan, and they say, well, no, not for you. We can't approve your loan, and all that. Or is it the same thing?
Uh, in the end, you might just end up going to the bank and not getting a loan, right? Roughly speaking.
And get a loan somewhere else.
Or get a loan somewhere else. Regarding products, we even had such products. Over time, they started losing their relevance because overall, this approach, yes, of the product itself, it's apparently not long term. So, strong marketing, I've seen cases where it really helped, or rather, it generated a lot of interest in the product, and a funnel was built. Yes, that way it generated a lot of interest. The funnel was built so that those who wanted to buy were interested, and some dropped off. Well, you got buyers. But how long those buyers keep using it is unclear.
And the question immediately arises, what's the time frame? You're talking about long term. In your view, it seems there's a certain shelf life.
Uh-huh.
What exactly is it? Well, let's say, for example, for a company, for a startup, and even for a baby startup.
If we're talking about such a long-term product, then I believe in a term of 5 years or more. So it doesn't just, if within 5 years, yes, it got hyped, took off, made money, I don't know, spent money, and that's it. And then it faded and people left and churn started, well, then it's a short-term product. If it continues to work for 5 years and beyond and earns steadily,
Let's say 10.
yes, well, then it's a more or less long-term product. Medium term. Medium term.
Okay, 10 to 15.
That's not bad.
Uh-huh. And what's the longest term? Is 30 ideal for you? How many years is ideal for you?
How many years is ideal for me? Well, I think probably 20 years. But here, if we're talking about technological products,
Well, of course.
especially fintech products, well, then they will change over time, evolve. But to change as well, you need resources in order to, and not just so that some outside guy said there's a problem and then got fired, right? But to listen to that guy, ask not just your junior staff, but also the people who deal with the consequences of these problems every day and do the work so that people use it and you keep earning.
And is it possible to identify a long-term or even, you could say, an eternal product from this? I mean, for example, this might be a bit of a rough analogy. Say the tourism business. Let's say they've made a deal with hotels in Turkey or something else and they're bringing in tourists. But essentially, the appearance, at least they might work for 20 years, it looks like an eternal business. But of course, we don't rule out a pandemic or something else that could act as a catalyst in destroying that business. But besides these examples, how exactly, to what extent, is it really a kind of philosophical and practical miracle to encounter such, let's say, companies in one's lifetime? In Kazakhstan or elsewhere, have you come across them? Have you encountered such companies often? I'll be honest, in my whole life, well, you could say 60% out of 100 were like that. All the others I've seen, I mean, when you go on vacation or somewhere else. So, in any case, you encounter them in your lifestyle, in everyday life. What about you?
In Kazakhstan, I suppose. Not yet, probably. And as for lifestyle, I can't say I really use anything like that. I've never used the services of travel agencies there. At most, some kind of excursion, yeah, relatively speaking.
Well, say Starbucks. Is that a good example? Ah, you've seen it. Ah, well, you've come across it.
Yes, I have come across that one.
That's the kind of example I mean. It doesn't have to be tourism. I'm saying that was just the roughest example. But you see that they've been operating for a long time, and overall, well, they could work for another 100 years.
Yes, most likely. But Starbucks isn't exactly a new invention in that sense either.
Okay, Mercedes.
Well,
Long lasting?
long lasting, high quality, reliable. Well, because they work hard on the product,
Yes.
so you can't argue with that. So, yes, it's either like Madonna, who stays relevant and continues to remain so, about lifestyle companies, well, coffee shops that existed, I don't know, in the 16th century in the East, and then they essentially were reborn thanks to Starbucks into mass market lines like that. And probably about adaptability. One could even recall here, I actually interned at Amazon Web Services myself, and I had the opportunity when I was in Chicago to learn more about the company. So, back in the day when there weren't really any web services yet, as I understand it, Amazon bought IMDb apparently to further develop Amazon Prime, well, in order to diversify their resources in that way. So, adaptability, well, it's just that times change and that's normal, it's logical, and people change. I mean, every person, every era, it brings some kind of new update of its own.
Can we, let's say, for instance, classify this as forced changeability, or is it still a type of adaptability?
Well, I can't say because I wasn't on the board of directors at Amazon when they made the decision to buy. But what I managed to understand specifically in Amazon's case is that Jeff Bezos is a very long term oriented person, and that's why he later started developing the space business. Simply because he was looking for those specific fields that would bring him the largest amount of money.
Now, in fintechs, there's another common issue, which is compliance. Do you often deal with compliance?
At my current job, not that often yet. I work for a company that digitizes manufacturing.
They have it too, though.
They have compliance, yes. And we've already gone directly to where these production sites are located to film some content. Right now, we're at this stage of negotiations in order to not classify, or rather not declassify things. So, yeah, already
We won't classify it. We won't classify your.
won't classify, right?
Won't classify.
Oh, not declassify, yeah. So now I'm starting to deal with it again bit by bit. I was just freelancing for a few years and was a much happier person back then. Yeah, you deal with it, but it's normal. These, like on a plane, rules are written in blood. In compliance, rules are usually written in money.
Unfortunately, true.
with sentences, prison ones, lawsuits. So it's logical, I respect that, and in that sense, it's similar to PR as it also carries reputational risks and it's much easier to prevent or, well, clearly admit, yes, your mistake, than to fix the mistakes that have already been made, of course.
If I were to ask you specifically from a public relations perspective, what exactly was and what is compliance? In the simplest terms possible, how would you go about answering that question?
I'd say it's a great, cool, necessary thing that helps keep us all in check. And it doesn't let things get out of hand. It doesn't allow, by the way, for chasing clout. Yeah, because every field has its own definitions. So no, I support compliance. Yes, of course, it can like kill creativity, but those startups, well, startups are startups because they can afford to test things and they don't have a compliance manager yet. They simply can't afford one. But when they continue to grow and more people and more financial resources are involved in the field or the company's work, then it's logical, especially when it comes to data, to personal human data. Yeah, well, I'd even say that PR people and compliance managers are very similar. Actually, it's just that we aren't taken as seriously because reputational threats aren't taken as seriously. Although compliance also takes into account, among other things, reputational risks. That's why I respect them. We are essentially like brothers in misfortune.
How do you actually know when a startup is truly dying or on the verge of failing? Where exactly is this red flag or perhaps this ever-present, omnipresent warning beacon that signals trouble ahead? We ask these questions so that we can better understand where things are headed and to recognize the signs before it is too late.
I've consulted for 101 startups over 2.5 years. In that time, I'd say it's when the founder tries to. So basically, my job was to convince, well, as the consultant, that was my role with them, convince them, right, that they really do not need to do it. Customer development, that they don't need research, they already know it all. I'm not denying it, really. You have to follow your intuition, trust yourself, yes. And relatively, even when those startups I consulted for, where are they now? My English stand up, hello, we're getting 100 people there. Because I was doing, of course, yes, I relied on my gut feeling. People told me too, no one will come, better to do it in the States. And these were quite respected people. But I did it, yet at the same time, I knew I had some social capital, a reputation, and I just looked at it as, well, I'm testing hypotheses. So I guess, by the way, when a startup, it's a mindset too, right? Of people when they're not in that flow of testing hypotheses, by the way, when they censor themselves and go, no, no, I only think this way, we must only do it this way, and they aren't flexible with themselves, first and foremost. If they're set like that, then they won't last long.
Then, in that case, when should you fight? And when should you let go?
I don't know. Everyone has to answer that for themselves.
That's the shortest answer we've ever had on the podcast.
Why overthink it? Why? If a person really wants it, is interested, and their goal is actually to make money from it, to get some resources, well, they'll think it through. If their goal is just, well, to join the scene, to get some hype, then they probably won't think it through. Or they'll build up illusions again that will be hard to let go of.
Are there any universal signals then?
Well, as I said, when, first of all, the startup isn't flexible with itself, isn't open, isn't honest, and censors itself.
So, after all, flexibility is the most important factor for survival.
Well, yes, adaptability.
But is that just in fintech or everywhere?
Everywhere, of course.
Thank you so much, Shugyla, for joining us today in our episode and talking about PR and why so many startups still vanish without a trace. And I think the most valuable thing here is that we talked about startups without the usual pretty packaging, because especially in fintech, it's very easy to get carried away by the idea, the pitch, ambitions, and the feeling of a big market. It's much harder to ask yourself more unpleasant but important questions. Who really needs this? Why should it work? Where's the money? Where are the risks? And how much of this is actually real? And probably the sooner founders start asking these questions, the better their chances of not just launching, but actually building something. That was the xChief Central Asia podcast. I've been Mikhail. Thanks for being with us. Leave a like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and ask your questions.